Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Crossing the Finish Line. I'm your host, Cody Kaler. Today, I have a very special guest, actually. She's a great friend of mine, as well as one of the top sales trainers in our industry. She's the owner of Samantha Jones Consulting. She also hosts a great podcast called Meet Me for Coffee. Usually airs on Tuesdays, I believe. She can probably fill you in a little bit more on that. But yeah, her name is Samantha Jones. Let's go ahead and just bring her on. Hey, Samantha.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I had to unmute myself there, even though I podcast all the time. Would still be the one to start talking while on mute.
I got that right. You're on the same Tuesdays as I am, right?
I think, yeah, actually, yes. So with an exception, I was sick last week and still kind of struggling this week. So I moved this week's to next. But then we'll be back to normal. So yeah, Tuesday mornings at 9:30 Central Time is every other Tuesday is my podcast.
Awesome. And for anybody listening, if you haven't checked out her show, check it out. She's always got great guests on there, great content, a lot of free content that you guys would probably end up paying for if you actually hired a consultant or anything. So definitely check it out. But with that, so I usually ask people how you got started in freight. That's always the go-to question, right? So how about you just give a little intro, kind of tell me your background, how you got into this insane industry that we're in, and let's go from there.
Is it crazy? I don't know. I think I'm crazy too. So maybe we work good together.
I was bald before I was 40, so I blame that on logistics.
Well, okay. So I started actually in logistics right out of college, scooped up at a career fair by ArcBest ABF Freight. So I went into the management training program, which was basically like they just dunked you head first into operations in an LTL environment. So I did that it was about a 6-month program. I did enjoy it. I actually studied operations in school. I tell people all the time, I'm an operator with a sales personality. So that's how I ended up in sales eventually. But I'm a huge fan of operations and definitely a role that I enjoy when I get to mingle with the operations teams of the companies I work with now. And so after the 6-month program, I had a newborn at the time. He was about 10 months old when I was completing that. And I just was like, I cannot sustain the absolute grueling schedule that a 24-hour operation usually requires of its leaders. So we would switch from days to nights every 2 weeks and things like that. And so it was becoming very difficult. So long story short there, I moved into sales and never went back. And so I've been on the sales side of our industry now. I was always a provider throughout my career. So on the I was a broker or sometimes had some assets in certain sales, but primarily on the brokerage space. I moved up from an account manager role to a director of enterprise sales to a vice president of revenue at a startup company to co-founding a sister company to that company, all in the full truckload brokerage space predominantly. And then I decided in 2023 to be crazy and start my own business. And I founded Samantha Jones Consulting. And I consult predominantly with brokers and carriers, but also tech companies and some other unique companies in our space on their sales and brand strategies. And so in summary there, I started in logistics and I never found a way to get out of it. But something that I love about the space is how dynamic and fast-paced it is. And for someone like me who gets bored really quickly, I don't like to sit still. I don't like to do the same thing for too long. It's given me a lot of opportunities. I also always champion our space for being so open and receptive to young people and the talent that they can bring in. And I love that I truly believe our industry will reward hard work. So if you come in and you work hard, you're going to see the results and you're going to climb the ladder if that's your goal, or make the money if that's your goal. And so that's me. That's why I've stayed. That's why I stuck around. And that's why I love helping other people get into the space and also have successful careers in the space.
Love it. I honestly think the best sellers come from operations because I remember when I first got into this and I talked to my buddy, he's the vice president of sales at Great Dane Trailers. And the number one thing he always said is make sure you understand your product. If you don't understand your product, you're never going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people jump headfirst into sales just thinking, I have a great personality. I don't mind talking to people, right? Like I'm social. But man, if you don't take that time to understand what you're trying to sell, you're going to fail. So like, I love it. I have a background in operations as well. And I think that that's definitely helped me navigate this crazy industry, because people want to talk to people who know what they're talking about. Right.
Yeah. And I would say too, like, so that's a learned skill usually too, because we don't tend to do that. We don't tend to hire operators into sales roles. So, and then we train them on all things sales. And so there's usually historically, and probably still is, often a disconnect. And I'll use my own experience and say that when I started my first company as an account manager, I came from 6 months of like, I ran operations on a daily basis. I saw how it worked for our LTL solution. And so for my first year, LTL was like over 80% of my revenue, but I had 28 solutions to offer. But because I knew it, I knew everything about it. So even when my customers had issues, like something was short, something was damaged, something was missing, when I picked up the phone to call someone, I knew how to speak to that terminal. I knew exactly what I was asking for. I knew what their capabilities and their resources were. I had people on my team, like other salespeople, who would call a terminal and ask them to do something that's not even like realistically possible. And it's like, that's the difference, right? Of understanding an operation. So I always say that it's twofold. You can get answers for your clients faster when you understand the operation, but two, you are liked more internally and you get things faster. You get more done, you get better pricing, you name it, I got it because I knew how to collaborate better internally. And depending on the size of your organization, particularly in large organizations, I call it like politicking. How well you can politic will directly impact how well and how capable you are to your client. So I don't know, that's something that I always challenge, like shippers, actually, when I talk to shippers that now that, I don't have any skin in the game usually with them, I mention things like that. Like, do you have all stars as your account reps? Like, do you know that? Do you know they know their stuff? Because if not, they're probably costing you money.
Yep. The less red tape, the better, right?
Yeah. And that's that was obviously like, there's nuance, right? That's the fun part of a lot of times in a smaller operation, your sales contact might be like third or fourth in command at that company, and they have a lot of leeway to make decisions. A lot of times they're given a lot of leeway in P&Ls and like what profit margins they choose or how they want to build out the carrier sourcing solutions and things like that. And so there can also be a lot of benefit in partnerships like that, obviously, when you have someone who really knows how to operate and sell leading your account.
Absolutely. So one thing that you've actually taught me a lot over the last year, because if anybody's out there wondering, I speak very highly of Samantha because we've worked together. So I've seen the benefits that she brings as a consultant. But let's talk about branding versus selling, right? Because that's one thing that you taught me a lot about, was what's the difference. And there's a lot of differences between the two. And there's a lot of benefit to understanding how to brand yourself, not just your company, but a personal brand, versus picking up a call or picking up a phone and making cold calls or cold emailing, right?
Yeah. So a little bit of context here, I guess. We've been working together and we offer sales and brand strategies, is what we call it, to our clients. And so both of those go hand in hand to create an overall sustainable revenue strategy is what we're focused on. So how do we drive in, convert, and retain revenue to a business that we call it sustainable, because sustainable means the revenue fits our business and we make money on it. Like, we're not just focused on top line, we're focused on profit margins too in our industry. So it has to be something that you can run month to month, year to year, and make money on it, and it makes sense for your operation. So that's what we do. So originally, when I started my business, I looked at it a lot as just sales. I'm like, oh, we just want to help people sell. Like, we're going to teach them how to sell. We're going to train them on sales. And then as we started doing that, I immediately started to notice like a lot of the success that I experienced as a seller, which is how I do this, right? Like I was boots on the ground. I was in the grind every day, full-time sales, like for my whole career before I started consulting. A lot of that success I had experienced was, I wouldn't say 100% dependent on my personal brand, but very enhanced by my personal brand. So I think I experienced things like faster deal cycles, higher meeting like booking rates, higher conversion rates from initial meeting to deal close. So, and it's because a brand does something that is very unique to our space. I feel like we're B2B. We're selling business to business. We're selling services. This would be a little different, in my opinion, if we were selling products. We're selling services. And so you are, as a shipper, you are procuring someone's ability to serve you well the way they say they're going to, at the rates they say they're going to.
Yep.
In the markets they say they are good at, with the things they say they're good at doing. So it's like all trust-based, right? Like we are assuming people mean what they say and can do what they say. And so we talk a lot about know, like, trust in sales when you're talking about services. That person, that shipper per se, they need to feel like they know you, they like you, and they can trust you most of the time. Sometimes scale allows people to circumvent that. So like I've known plenty of shippers, like I cannot stand the people I work with at XYZ company, but they do 300 loads a month for us. So what are we going to do about it? You know, and they execute. So aside from that, and that was still earned, I guess, technically, they had to trust them at the beginning to get to that point. We are trying to help enhance that feeling of, I feel like I know you. I feel like I can trust you. And I like you. Like I generally like you. How I perceive you. I want to work with you. Like you're someone I would consider working with. That can be accomplished through a brand presence, to where all they need to do is meet you one time, and they need you in that meeting to live up to the expectation they already have in their head of what you are like, based on how they've perceived you from a virtual standpoint. And as long as you can, like I tell people, come through 80% living up to that expectation, like with whatever they had created in their head that you are, you know about, you're connected with, you do, then there's a high likelihood that they will be willing to continue to engage and move forward with you. And so that's what we do. We help people build a brand presence that accurately portrays them, positions them as the expertise in the whatever sector that they have that expertise in, and helps build credibility. We're looking at brand as like the thing that backs you, that gives you your credibility, that precedes you into a sales cycle. And that's our goal. I have found almost zero instances where a shipper like reached out to me and was like, you know, your LinkedIn is so great. Would you please have an intro call with me and do business with me? That never happened to me. But I could give you at least a dozen instances of me reaching out to someone in an email, not even like LinkedIn, and then responding with something along the lines of, yeah, I've seen your stuff on LinkedIn. I'd be open to talking more.
Yep.
They were never going to raise a hand, right? But it preceded me into it. I had that like, oh, I know her. Yeah, I know this lady. Okay, I'll talk to her for 30 minutes, like see where this goes, because of my brand presence. And so that's what we're trying to help our clients emulate and recreate for themselves in a very hyper competitive space.
Yeah, they know you're a real person, right? That's key. Is you're not just somebody behind an email that, you know, could be halfway around the world. And
make yourself a person. Like this is crazy, but think about your brand as an opportunity to make yourself real. Because I can tell you right now, I delete emails every single day from people who reach out to me. I don't know them. To me, for all I care, you're an AI bot trying to sell me some solution I don't think I need in the first place. And then I don't see a picture in your signature. I don't see your LinkedIn profile. You don't say anything like I don't know you.
Yep.
So I don't care. And I delete those all day long. So like shippers have it 20 times worse than I do right now, right? Like they don't know you. So there's a lot of different things that we teach even outside of LinkedIn to try to like combat that. A picture in your signature. As long as we're not getting indications we're like messing up some type of spam filters or something, I usually have our professional like web designer create them so that they like the formatting is correct. But like a very small way to like make yourself real. Right? A video. We do a lot of video messaging and emails. Make yourself real. And then LinkedIn, of course, is like one of our number one ways to do that. Try to get in front of that is make yourself a person. I think we're overcomplicating sales. So something I like to say is that like it's not complex. It's like not complex, but it's not easy. So like what we have to do from an execution standpoint, you're like, oh, okay, it's pretty basic. Doesn't mean it's easy to do successfully, to do well. So that's kind of what we focus on helping people do is these things sound great. They sound, you know, pretty straightforward, but then you go to execute it and you immediately are like, when, how, where, overwhelmed. And that
Right.
I experienced that a lot, especially early in my sales career. And so that's what we try to help people do now.
Yeah. And it's been, I like to tell my team that branding is the bridge from cold calls to warm leads, right? Like
Yeah.
if you want your cold calls to become warm leads, to your point of they actually know who you are, they know that you're a person, they know that you're speaking as an expert in some of your sectors, like that changes people's perception. You're not just hey, this is Samantha Jones, you have no idea who I am, but give me your freight, right? Like everybody else is getting right now. Shippers, I mean, they're getting 200-300 of those a day, right? Either
Yeah.
email or calls. So those guys being able to understand that you're a real person is just, I mean, it's night and day difference. So anybody listening out there who didn't understand the difference between branding and just your traditional selling, she explained it far better than I ever will. But focus on your branding. Reach out to Samantha. She's one of the best in the industries when it comes to that. And really, really, really listen to what she said, because right now in this market probably isn't changing for another year, I would assume. You got to find a way to stand out. And if you're not focusing on your personal branding, you're going to get left behind with everybody. So,
yeah.
So good stuff. All right. So speaking of the market, I got to ask you this. What's your take on it? When do you think the switch is going to happen? And how severe do you think the switch is going to be? Are we going to see a 2014 little camel hump, or are we going to see a 2018, 2020 race to the top?
Oh man, this is so fun because I always ask people this question on my podcast, and now someone's asking me. So I hope I've been a good student. I think let's talk about market, kind of where we're at right now. We're actually in the next market cycle. I know you were just at DatCon with me. They talked about this. We've actually we've surpassed the lowest point, I think, of this trough, and we're working barely to kind of climb out of it so far. But technically, that low point in that trough would have been the end of the last market cycle and the start of the next. So there's also a lot of indicators out there right now that are saying we found near equilibrium in the supply and demand equation. So meaning our carrier attritions are slowing. We're seeing about as many carriers exit each month as enter. We're kind of finding that equilibrium point. So we're also seeing that evidenced in any little disruption that we have after the immediate spike or bump in kind of strain in the market. It immediately goes back to being calm. We're not seeing sustained disruption because of one catalyst, which would be an indication that we have reached a point where we have less carriers than we have demand, but we're not at that point. So we have a inspection week or something like that. We see a little bit of strain, and then we're right back to normal right now. So we have been in a very good spot from a capacity standpoint here recently. So yeah, we're going to continue to see some carriers exit probably, but like I said, right now, we're also amazingly, it's kind of crazy to think about, there are still carriers coming into the marketplace or authorities becoming active each month. So that's where we're at. Something else that I think is really interesting to note as to why it's taken this long and why we are where we're at right now from a capacity standpoint is what Dean talked quite a bit about on his panel at the DatCon Summit, in that a lot of carriers made a lot of money. We've heard that talked about. I knew that, but something that felt like new information to me was he said the spread right now in fixed operating costs for carriers for smaller to mid-sized fleets has never been wider. So we're seeing some people, their fixed operational costs are $1.50 a mile, and some people are $2.10. Yep. This is a huge difference when our average right now, they're saying the average is $1.82 or something like that. But the reality is you have carriers who can operate at 50 cents per mile less and make money than some of their peers who lose money at these rates. And so if we see further attrition, I'm very of the opinion it's going to be these guys operating on these higher fixed operational costs, because even as we start to revert to higher prices, which I think was coming in the next year, it will be a slow climb. So I'm calling for that 2014 feel is what most people are. I'm not making these bold predictions by myself. I'm simply aligned with what a lot of other people are calling for, I think. And that would kind of support my theory that even as we're climbing to that, I think we'll still continue to shed some of these guys who are just honestly have priced themselves out of a sustainable business right now. And that will kind of help further this concept of spot rates increasing over time too. Because we're not going to get to that high of operating like rate per miles. And so unless you're in a really niche space and you're selling yourself really well, you're probably not going to be able to sustain what might be another 6, 9, potentially 12 months before you see a meaningful impact to your top line revenue through these rates. I was reading comments. I read comments as they come in. Lowest freight volumes historically. Yeah. So, I mean, here's something, actually, I love this transition in my kind of overview here. Vitaly is calling out lowest freight volumes, talking about Q1. So Q1's always our slowest point, but why does that matter more now? Because in a normal freight market, seasonality matters.
Correct.
In a non-typical freight market, it doesn't. So in 2021 and 2022, we didn't have seasonality. Everything was on fire, right? And then in 23, everything was dead. Like we didn't have seasonality. Again, we had overcapacity with low volumes. So we didn't have seasonality. So I don't think we've seen a real period of seasonality since, and 19 was ELD driven. So like
18, 19. So really, even 18 was the start of the ELD drive, right? So like,
so the 14 to 18 market cycle, again, is what I'm coming back to. It was like, I think typically we're seeing like 3 to 4 year market cycles ish, somewhere in that. So I think that's what we're looking at, is that time period. Which something I love to tell people is like, I just barely snuck in that range. Like I was barely pre-pandemic. Like I came in around the 18, 19 point, but I didn't see that full cycle through. So I didn't know what it was like from 14 to ELD. So that's how a lot of our industry, we have a young industry now. It's crazy. We lost a lot of retirements happened in the pandemic. A lot of demand for new talent emerged in the pandemic. A lot of growth happened. We have a very young industry who doesn't have the luxury of being like, oh yeah, the 14 market. Like I know what that's going to be like. So this is going to be, in my opinion, quite shocking for quite a few, especially brokers, younger fleets who kind of cropped up in the pandemic era. We're going into something that's actually should be considered normal. That's not going to feel like anything they've experienced. And so I think that'll be interesting to see, because we're not talking about, oh, we've been riding out these really low lows, but we're hanging in there for the really high highs. Not this year, not even next, maybe not even 26, right? Because like I really think that this peak is going to be considerably lower than anything we've experienced in the last 7 years. So
I agree. And
it's going to require smarter business operations. It is going to require efficiencies, and it's going to require strong partnerships, smart pricing. And so we're actually, in my opinion, we haven't even really gotten into trimming out the excess in our space, especially from a brokerage standpoint.
Oh yeah, I agree.
A lot of trimming on the carrier side because it's been hard for them for 2 years. But even as rates improve, I expect to see brokers fail.
Yeah, I can't remember who publishes the data, but I think we're on average losing about 250 brokers per month right now.
Brush pass.
Yeah, there you go. And a lot of people don't understand what Dean always talks about this on the DAT podcast is we've never had a bull market based off of a loss of capacity. It's always been a disruption, right? Yeah. And so you can never gauge how impactful a disruption is going to be, right? Hopefully, knock on wood. I mean, I'm old enough. I remember the impact in 08 and 09, but hopefully we never see, anything like COVID again. Because that was not just the tailwind itself has been bad, right? It wasn't just the peaks that was crazy, but the tailwind of, I can't remember how, I think the capacity grew 40 or 45% or something during COVID, which is insane if you think about how many carriers are out there, right? And it's going to take a long time to flush that out of the system. And so, it's just, it's been a crazy few years. I mean, everyone thought 18, 19 was weird, right? But then COVID smacked us in the face. And now everybody's to your point, all the newer brokers, they're not going to know how to handle a normal cycle. And I do think you're right. This is going to be a normal cycle. You're going to see it's no heart monitors.
I'll throw a curveball out there because it'd be fun if I end up being right. I think the only way we don't have a normal cycle is if people just lose their mind after a certain upcoming event this
Yeah.
next week. So like, I think if, or geopolitical tensions escalate for
Right.
any reason that change things. Like if for any reason we enter a war, even if we don't directly enter it, if the world enters any type of escalated conflict, or if we have political, economical disruption here in the US, like I think that these are catalysts for something very negative. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not like, oh, we see all this demand spike all of a sudden. It would be worse. Like it would be potentially like I think recessions are largely based on how people feel. We're very like they're very emotionally driven. So if people start to get hyper concerned about the strength of their dollar or their investments, and they start to react a certain way, and we start to see a large like we could easily put ourselves into a recessionary position. If we have a normal election cycle, if everyone can keep their chill for a few more months and we can make it through this, like I'm just saying, this would be an outlier position, but I'm willing to throw it out there that I don't think it's like impossible. I think it's unlikely. I hope it's unlikely, but I think like we could potentially see things get worse. I've also heard talk about like, okay, well, even if the US economy goes into a recession, does that mean we're in a trucking, like a freight recession? Not necessarily. Like, because the US economy GDP has been great. We are growing. We're one of the best economies in the world right now, and we're in a freight recession. So obviously we don't have to mirror each other. But I think it matters like what industries are hit hardest by an economic recession, which is usually like manufacturing doesn't do well in economic recessions. And that's over 60% of trucking ton miles. So government spending doesn't usually go to like things that might be driving freight volumes in periods of economic strain. So we'd have to see. But I do think it's possible to have a recovering freight market in a cooling economy, which is what I predict as our like most likely scenario here. Because as we start to see recovery into this normal freight market cycle and seasonality, I think that the economy is kind of in a cooling off period still. Like we are still coming down from these highs that we've had, and we're settling into what is the normalcy now. Like what's the new normal? We got inflation mostly under control. People are trying to readjust to that. People are trying to reassess where their spending power is. You know, companies are kind of waiting to see what they're going to be doing after elections and tax changes and things like this. But I just think that we're kind of, there are no reports calling for like record spending at Christmas this year. We're tired. People are tired. We're financially tired, right? Of what we had to expend the last couple of years through inflation.
Yeah, and typically, if you look at the GDP report, what's actually seeing a lot of growth is services, right? And that's what suffered during COVID. So when services are seeing a lot of because the dollars are the dollars, there's no like magical pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The dollars are going somewhere, right? And when the dollars shift from materials and goods, like when we saw a huge demand during COVID because nobody else had anything to do but watch Netflix and, buy shit off Amazon. That was it. And when it shifted from that back to going to the movies and a lot of the services that we couldn't do during COVID, that kind of set off the freight recession. So if you look at the two, they don't really follow the same line to your point.
Yeah. I'm looking at manufacturing heavily. Like that's what we need to see strength returning to, where we've been like in the 40s for our PMI each month the last couple months, and like 50 and 50, anything under 50 is considered to be in like a retractive state. So we're looking for something expansionary to be pushing above 50 for a couple months consecutively at least. We don't show signs of moving that direction right now, so that's like my number one most important indicator for freight volumes to be recovering.
Yeah. December is going to be really telling. And to Vitali's point, like, if you look at it, February is always the slowest month of the year. It's February, and then typically October, depending on which you're moving, is number two. But February is always the slowest month of the year. You have the return cycle, the first part of January from Christmas, and then it just really cools off. It's usually like week 2 or week 3 of the year. It just cools off really bad. So if we don't have any sort of peak in December, Vitali might be right. We might see a mass exodus to smaller carriers. All right. And we always joke that there was two types of carriers during COVID. the carrier that went and paid off everything and invested in new equipment, and the carriers that bought G-Wagons, right? And I can tell you right now, the carriers that bought G-Wagons, they're probably not going to survive this freight cycle.
G-Wagon's probably not worth what a G-Wagon was worth a couple years ago either.
No.
So that was a sunk cost.
But like, Dean's charts were great. And it makes so much sense because those smart carriers that really did say, hey, you know what? I've been through these cycles before. My dad's been through these cycles before, and he's taught me how to handle this. I'm going to invest in new equipment. I'm going to invest in people. I'm going to pay off my equipment. I'm not going to go buy Gucci shoes and G-Wagons, whatever it is. Those guys, they're going to make a killing no matter where the market is, right?
Yeah. And another really interesting thing I liked that Dean brought up was that we're actually seeing carriers that elect to sit out right now because they want to. They want to. They're like, you know what? I paid off my stuff. So if I don't run my truck, I just don't pay myself this week. But I put away money. I have no debt. Like, they're in a great position. So there are carriers out there right now who are actually in a great, rather than run for a loss, because that's how a lot of these markets are pricing at times. They're like, no, or rather than run for pennies on the dollar, I'd rather just sit home and live minimalistically and, wait it out.
Yep.
And then they'll enter when things get better. They're in a very ideal position because you have people that's like the terrifying thing. I've said this before. I talked about this on a podcast like probably almost a year ago already. There aren't warning signs in freight.
Correct.
Someone will be on the road one day and chapter 11 the next, like a trucking company. A brokerage will be accepting 50 tenders one day and filing the next day.
Yep.
Like, these aren't publicly traded companies. We don't get these like, we had some rumors of companies that ended up closing that were leaked from like the factoring companies that like Convoy owed money to a large factoring company and they got shut off. So all the carriers knew they got shut off for a week and they fixed it to like save face and they got it all figured out. But like a month later they were closed. So we sometimes get like these sneak peeks into these previews of what might happen, but those are usually within instances of like multi-million, 100 million, how do you say that? 200, 300 million plus size companies. And that's a scary thing. So, I mean, I said this, I started saying this in 2022, 2023. If you're a shipper, if you're a broker, if you're a carrier, ask questions about the financial health of your partners. Ask for like some references of people they work with. And try to just be careful with vetting. But I'm going to say this again right now, because I think it's going to become more important for your broker partners in the next 12 months. So I'll bring it up again. Because just because rates start to go up, and even more specific, imagine a scenario of a broker who runs contract freight and cover their loads in spot, which 95% of brokers do, can also reinforce that number on the stage of DAT, which is my single most disappointing statistic in this industry. And I would make it my mission to try to change that. ANC does a great job, by the way.
I think a lot of that is what you're moving though too, right? Like a lot of that's the commodity that you're moving.
Yeah. So let's say hypothetically, you're getting paid $2 a mile right now to run something on contract. You're moving it at $1.50 a mile spot plus fuel. And these are fake numbers I'm making up. And the market starts to change in the next year. And now that $1.50 is becoming $1.80. And contract rates lag 6 months minimum.
Yep.
And if you're in a commitment for longer than that, they might just say tough luck.
Yep.
So there's a good chance that at least for 6 months, you're going to run that on that 70% reduction in margin without an opportunity to recoup that, without turning back the business, which that's suicidal right now. Nobody can turn back volumes. Because again, especially in the next freight market, just because rates start to change doesn't mean you can afford to lose position. That's another thing I don't think I haven't even considered like really discussing, but there will be people who survive this low market cycle that are barely scraping by and hanging in there. And they will take cheaper freight when it gets offered in the next market cycle. Yep. So if you think I'm just going to go back and ask for a price increase when I'm still 6 months into my 12 month because the price has changed and now we can make money on it, you are wrong. I believe you are wrong because someone else will come in and take it for exactly what you're running it for and be happy to have the freight.
It's all about market share, right?
Yeah. So we're not going to see this like everything's so high. We're all pricing high. We're all like taking what we want. Like that's not happening. So when you price ineffectively and you start getting pressure on your margins from your carriers in the spot market, if that's your coverage model, which is shit, fix that, then that's controllable. Like do a better job sourcing. Then you're in trouble and you can't go back to that shipper in 2025. Not in 2025. Probably not in early 26, but
Right.
they'll just be replaced because it's
Yep.
too competitive now. And the other reality is that I don't think we've been willing to come to terms with. There are brokers right now who could run circles around their competitors in terms of what they're capable to do from an automation standpoint, operationally. They will be able to take on 40% more volume next year without adding a single person to their headcount.
Yep.
Because they're ready for that.
At a smaller margin, right? Because
yes. And that's the
small
kick.
margin,
That's the
small
thing,
margin.
right, Cody? So like
Yep.
when you like optimize it, you can your 10% is someone else's like 4.
Correct.
So like you make more money. You price cheaper and make more money, or at least the same amount of money. You price
Yep.
cheaper and make the same amount of margins, right? So it's gonna get fun. Like in maybe not a good way because I'm not in brokerage, so I can say it. But like these are things that I'm talking with my broker clients about. Like we're trying to be intentional. We're trying to create a sustainable revenue model. We're trying to have really strong partnerships, and we're trying to also make sure we're running efficiently because the next time things really do get competitive, like the next cycle, we're getting there. So like in the next high cycle, whoever can who thinks like, oh, we're just going to wait to price and like win freight when things get tight, you're still going to find yourself getting beat on price. And you're going to wonder, like, why is this happening? Why do we still feel like things are cheap? Because there's people who are ready to just add that as 100% top line. Because if they don't have to add a single person to operate that, if they make 6%, you think they care? They win the market share. They put you out of business in a year, then they can up it to 12% because there's less competition. So that is the plan. That is the plan. Brokers are planning for that. They are planning to retain market share, grow more of it, and make better margins and drive their competition out.
Yep. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's right now it's all about market share. You know, the margins are the margins. And to your point, some people's margin, my 10% might be somebody else's 12%, might be somebody else's 4%. It's all based on relationships, one, right? What kind of relationships do you have with your carriers? What I talk about that all the time. I sound like a broken record, but if you have great relationships with your carriers, you're going to take care of your carriers are going to take care of you. If you just live on the spot market, you're going to die on the spot market, period. You know, and that's the crazy thing is there's a lot of brokers that got into this the last 4 years and that's all they've known. They just post it, post the load, post the load, post the load, right? Yeah. And it's like, yeah, that works in some markets and that works with some commodities. There's obviously some commodities that only move on spot, right? They don't do a lot of contract. Sure. That is what it is.
Yeah.
But man, contract is where to live as a broker. I can tell you guys that right now. Like, you know, that's the golden goose of relationships is getting on a contract and being able to have that relationship with somebody. And it's just, yeah, you guys got to tighten up those ops for sure. If you want to survive this next year, possibly 2 years, you got to tighten up those ops. I don't want to see 250 people leaving every single month. That's a lot of people out of work. However, if you've done it to yourself, there's nothing anybody can do to help you. Right.
No.
So I love it. I got one more question for you. I know we're running over a little bit, but I get this question quite often from people on LinkedIn. Is cold calling dead, in your opinion? With all of the automation that we have, all of the video calls that are, video messages that people have, in your opinion, as a veteran seller, is cold calling dead? In my opinion, I think cold calling is still number one. And I don't care what anybody says. People to people is going to always sell. Person to person is going to sell better than an email. That's just my opinion.
Well, if we're okay, so what are our options for?
We're talking,
cold
call, email, video, emails.
My number one is always going to be in person. So but I feel like that's a
absolutely,
given.
absolutely.
Right.
You usually got a call to get that though, right? Unless you're just one of those
conferences. Like, love a conference. Love a good conference as an aggressive salesperson. And shippers are all like, this is why we don't like you. No, just kidding. I love conferences as someone with a personal brand. Let me put that out there. so that people are like, I think I know her when you are walking up to introduce yourself.
Sure.
Okay. So cold calling, I will say this. I cold call every week with my clients. Not every week. It depends on like the part of the contract we're in, but I do sales training for brokers and carriers. I also have some clients right now who are in the tech space, and I've been building out their, like, I do the cold calls, hear what the objections are. We categorize those. We create plans for those. I am amazed at like how often I have conversations when I'm calling for the tech guys, because I'm calling brokers and carriers. And guess what? They answer the phone. It's so nice of them. They answer the phone. Like I average at least 2 quality conversations per hour of cold call. Like
there's no gatekeepers at brokerages. I know that. So,
calling cell phones, they're answering, they're fairly agreeable half the time.
They're probably just hoping you're a shipper.
Shippers, first of all, like the data is a nightmare. Like it is. Because I've worked in Zoom, I've worked in Apollo, I've seen what Seamless has to offer, I've seen some others. All of them are going to say they're vetting their data and they have up-to-date data and it automatically, and nope. So like half the time we don't even have a direct line to the person. We have like an office phone number that I'm pretty sure they never listen to, and they don't even know if there's a voicemail there. So we're trying to call, like the connect rate is low. That's our first problem. That's what gets me the most, I think, with cold calling is like you can spend 2 hours and have almost nothing to show for it. So I'll put that out there. If and when you can get someone to answer a phone, I love cold calling because you don't have an opportunity to ignore me in an email. Like you have to give me an objection, and I know my objections and I know my responses and I know why I'm calling you. Like I'm not a robot. I know why I called you. I know why. So here's a couple things. I just made a post on LinkedIn. I'll kind of give a quick guide to why I like cold calling. Like if you do it this way, you should never be calling someone that is not in your ideal client profiles. Like their company should be in your ideal client profile. Number one. So like you should only be calling people who are at companies that have already been vetted and approved as like, yes, we do great with this. Here's, they fit our ICP. Number 2, pick the person you call for a reason. Like this one's kind of hard because it takes more time. Like it's easy to just be like, anyone with a logistics title, call, like enroll in my call list. Here's a new approach I've been trying lately that I'm getting good results from. I create my company list first. I go to the company LinkedIn page and I look, and since I'm in, I guess over time it does this automatically. Since I'm in logistics and supply chain and whatnot, it automatically like recommends those people when I look at the employees that work for that company. So I can scroll through all those roles and I'm looking, and I try to find someone that like, sounds like the right title. I love if I can find someone who has like 3,000 connections, like followers, like they're active, they're engaged, they're in the space, which means they're educated. They know something. They're aware of what's going on. When you get objections and you talk about your answers to objections, typically, if you really know your stuff and you have a company worth selling, it's going to involve current market conditions, maybe like advanced solutions, new processes, things that someone who doesn't engage and know what's going on in the marketplace, quite frankly, won't care about at all. And so I always used to tell people an educated customer is my best customer and an ignorant customer is my worst customer. If you're ignorant, you're in trouble. But if you're educated, try to find people who are educated as your first point of contact. It's going to be your like higher chance of success. Yep. So it's not always a perfect world. You're not always going to find the right person with those types of connections. But I started calling those people, and I had a higher connect rate with those people. So like, I don't know if that's just happen chance, but I also had better conversations when I got them on the phone. And so I like that approach. I like being very strategic in who you're picking and why you're calling them, and then try a few times, see if it works for you. Yeah. And then my last little free tidbit on that would be, I don't like voicemails. I don't like rarely. I actually had someone return a voicemail the other day when I was like doing training with a client, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I have to answer this because if it goes to voicemail, it's going to be very confusing because it's Samantha Jones Consulting. But that was like the first time in years I ever got a return call to like a missed call. I don't even think I left a voicemail. I think I was like accidentally, like they just saw the missed call and called back. I like to go to LinkedIn, and if I'm connected with them or if I have the capability to, I like to send like a voice recording on LinkedIn because I feel like that's more personal and it's less aggressive too, in the sense that like I'm not sitting in your inbox, your voicemail, but like next time you check LinkedIn, you have a second, you want to listen to it, feel free on your own time. It's not weird if you want to respond at 10 o'clock. It's a LinkedIn message.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my little tidbit there, is I think that like email or voicemails are about pointless these days, but I love LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yep. One thing that I've actually really liked the last little while is I'll call their sales team, because who's always going to pick up and who wants to have a conversation? Someone in sales, right? So I can have some of the best conversations and learn a lot about the company and what they're, what they do, what their product is, from calling one of their sales rep. And also, they tend to be very nice individuals who will usually connect you, or at least get you to the right person, right?
Yeah.
Have a great conversation with somebody for 20 minutes and then just say, who do I need to talk to? That has been like, I've used that as an avenue several times, because
and two last thoughts here. One, like, confidence is the most important thing that you need to have when you're cold calling.
Absolutely.
Like a strong tone, like confidence. I just watched this little clip. It's actually on Facebook. I see this guy's stuff for like sales coaching all the time. It's like they know what I do or something. And he says like, oh, I was just calling, or when you get a chance, can you please? And like, he's like asking questions, and we use these different tones. And he's like, you are subconsciously, like they are subconsciously saying this person is like less than me.
Weak.
They need me. They want me. They like, it's needy. It's whiny. It's like less than what I want right now. And so I think one of the things that I like just naturally was good at is when I call someone, I'm like, hey, is this Cody? Hey, Cody, this is Samantha with ANZ Tracking. How are you? Like nothing of that was like, I'm intimidated. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you answered the phone. What am I going to do? Like, will you please give me everything you like you just, how you talk matters. And then Absolutely. Number 2 is come from a position of curiosity. Like ask questions, but like, don't assume you know everything. So like, I hate when people are like, the reason I'm reaching out to you today is because I saw that you do this and I know we'd be a great fit. And it's like, no, you don't, but you think you do. That. So like, and then I'm actually going to sneak another one in there because I'm about to do like a tip on this one. When you're calling and they say like they give an objection, have you considered just agreeing with them because they're probably right? Like throw them off for a second, but honestly, like they're probably right. When they say like, we're not onboarding any more brokers right now. Yeah, Cody, I totally understand it. I probably wouldn't be onboarding another broker right now either. I think the market the last couple of years has definitely supported that position. I wasn't actually calling to see if we could onboard right now. Really, I just wanted to see if we could build a relationship and determine if we might be a good fit in the future, that we could stay in touch. Are you asking to get onboarded right now? No, I don't know why that's such a hard objection for people to like overcome, because we don't step back and think about it like that, because we're going, you know why? People are going into that call with the goal of getting business.
100%.
You're going to fail. You're going to fail.
They've got a KPI, right? They've got a KPI. I've got to make X amount of phone calls. I need to get X amount of people signed up this month.
Yeah.
And, to go back to your ideal customer profile, myself as a leader, I would much rather my team make 5 calls a day to ideal customers than 200 cold calls and not get a single person to pick up. So, KPI should not be generated strictly off of volume. If you're not targeted in your approach, you're going to fail. So anyone can pick up and call 200 times, right?
I don't care at all what my salesperson like output looks like if their revenue looks great. Like that's the only metric that matters. When you don't have revenue, then the numbers matter.
Correct.
If you're going to tell me, I only need to do 5 calls a day, but I have $0 on the books for the month, I'll be like, no, we have a serious issue right now. Like this is a problem. But if you're going to tell me, no, Samantha, all I want to do is 5 calls a day, but I have $50 million of revenue, I'm like, you could go on vacation 4 days a week if you found a way to maintain that, for all I care. Right. So that's always the thing in sales is like, we're looking at results. We don't need to measure activity for activity's sake.
Yep. Agreed. Cool. Well, I know we've gone over by about 20 minutes. I really appreciate your time. So anybody out there in my audience, I highly suggest you guys reach out to Samantha. If you don't already know her, I know she's got a huge following out there, so you probably do. But I found her randomly a year ago because I happen to watch her podcast. We've had a great friendship and great working relationship ever since then. She's been a huge help for us. I can attest to that. So definitely reach out to her if you guys are struggling, if you guys are new in the industry. There is help out there. So definitely reach out to her. If you guys can't find her for some ungodly reason, because she's all over, reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you guys. But definitely, I suggest any seller out there, whether you're a veteran or a rookie, check out her stuff, at least check out her content. So thank you, Samantha, for joining me today. And
Yeah.
thank you everybody out there for listening. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.